All righty. So let me introduce our team that we've assembled. We have a great team, as I mentioned, that's been working, doing outreach to people who are on either the eviction list, who are scheduled for an eviction, and or have a court date set to, for their eviction hearing. We're also doing some general outreach as well to just people who may find themselves at some point in this situation. So let me introduce Salim Adolfo. Salim holds many hats. He's an ANC in Ward 8. He's been with us now several months, leading the on-the-ground efforts as our outreach director. Welcome, Salim.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
We also have Jewel Camara. She is been with us since the beginning now too. And she is also, I know she's a student currently and working with us, 4 days a week, doing outreach to folks. So welcome, Jewel.
Hello.
And we also are joined by Donovan Mahoney, who as well, if I'm not mistaken, Donovan is a Ward 8 resident and has been doing this work with us now for several months as well. Welcome, Donovan.
Hey, how are you all?
Great. Salim, I wonder if you would just share with us in general what the day looks like, right? What are you guys doing to get out there and connect with people who are either faced with an immediate eviction date and or an eviction court date?
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate the opportunity to tell, our story of what it's like trying to help save the lives of many of the residents here in Ward 8 and 7. The days, depending on the day of the week, we're either in at 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. We look at the list of folks that we got. There's a court docket that we have to see if the cases that are still relevant, because most of them still are, but there are a few who, cases may already have been heard. So we have to cross-reference it with that. Then because they're spread out all across Ward 7 and 8, we tend to figure out what the route will be. And we try to get to about 40 people, throughout the day. And looking at the list of folks who are impacted by this, we can see that they're concentrated in some areas. Like, for example, we know that like in Southwest DC or in the Ward 8 sex side of it, we might have 40 to 50 homes in just the Wingate Bellevue community alone. And so that'll allow us to, get to a lot of people in that area. But then we may have some all the way on the other side of the east of the river in Ward 7. So we just kind of map it out. There's been times we go together. Sometimes we would split up just to try to hit, some more. And, to be honest, when I'm looking at it, it's telling me that the poverty in the city is concentrated in specific communities. And if it's done over an extended period of time, I can't say that it just happened to be that way. To me, it's if it started out that way, it's definitely on purpose that it continues to be that way. And so, we talk to the folks when we can. A lot of people don't answer the door. And then there are times where we also got to provide other services. I know like today, I believe Jewel sent me a picture where there was just a hole in the door. And that's just not safe, right? And it's kind of like a catch-22. If we can get into the place, it's good because we can connect with the families. But if we can get into the place, it's bad because then that means that the safety that they have there has been breached. And so we run into this often with a lot of apartments. And we find ourselves having to help with just some other issues sometimes. And that may be putting in some service requests. Or I find myself having to contact, at the time it was DCRA, about issues with property owners that don't do what they need to do in order to maintain the standard of living that is fit for a human being in some of these places. You may have mold, you have a lot of leaking, especially in some of the laundry rooms. There's just puddles of water, trash everywhere. And we find that, we need additional support, not just the emergency rental assistance or legal services, but just other quality of life issues. And then, for me, I'll get all of the data of how many people we contacted, even if we may have contacted folks that are non-English speakers. But then we forward that up the chain, and it's been an eye-opening experience. I mean, you live in the community and you have an idea what's going on, but until you knock on doors and you get to really see how people are living on a day-to-day basis, it lets you know that we definitely have a rent crisis in the city, but we also have just a crisis in terms of the quality of life of the affordable housing that's provided, and not just affordable housing but quality housing as well. So I'll stop right there. I know we'll have some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Salim, for that. It reminded me, Salim, he ain't lying. Like one of the first days we went out, we were trying to get into a property, and as soon as we get to the gate, there was this big old pit bull right there. And we were like, what do we do? Do we like go in, and try to get at these doors or risk, whatever this pit bull may do? So we definitely try to be as safe as possible. So thank you, Salim, for sharing that. Now, I wanted to ask Donovan and Jewel, just in general, what interested you in doing this type of work? What when you heard about this, aside from the obvious compensation that you receive, like with any other job, why did you think it was important to get involved in doing this anti-eviction work?
I wouldn't really say it was the compensation. It was actually the environment that I was actually living in that was making an effect on me, my children, my friends, my community. That's why I gear myself to this type of work initially, because I feel as though it's not really work, it's more so me building my community back up. For the most part, these are things that we face every day, and we've been so desensitized to it that we don't even realize that there are problems or issues in our community. A lot of the times we just see it as, all right, we're gonna be able to see a brighter future for ourselves, but every day we have children who are young that are waking up to abandoned buildings and things of that nature, and that's all that they see. So how can they have a vision of seeing anything brighter in their future or anything of that nature? So my work is more so not just commission based, it's more so just making a change overall.
That's right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I can totally agree with Donovan. This work wasn't just for the money, because the housing crisis in DC is terrible. Like Salim said, the homes that we go into, you'll just see mold in there. So the quality of housing is just terrible. So I got into this work due to wanting to help local communities here in the DMV area. And I came across EmpowerDC. So their missions and goals really aligned with me. So that is why I hopped on board and started doing this work.
Awesome. Thank you both. Salim alluded to some of these issues. We're out there and we're not just encountering people who just have an eviction issue, right? There's people who are faced with a multitude of issues because many are living in poverty. This is open to the three of you all. Aside from the immediate eviction issues, what else have you heard from residents? What other issues are prominent? That I want to say that part of this work, not that it has surprised us, but once again, it's reaffirmed how much need, how much suffering there is in the communities that we're working in. So talk a little bit about what else have we seen as we've been engaging with people faced with an eviction.
I can start that off. I think that like we see a lot of other social issues, housing issues that people have. One of the biggest things that I could tell you that is an issue for me is we don't have a lot of active tenant associations. And I think strong tenant associations are important, because the more you're organized, the better you are to respond to a lot of these issues. And so we don't have that often. And some of the other things that I see, like I said, are the quality of life issues that are in some of the buildings. And I'll let Jewel and Don add on some of the other things that they see.
One thing is that people have, talking with the tenants, one tenant, you know, she just said that she just is not able to keep up with the rent. There's other family members that require more help, and so everything just piles up and adds on. So they're just not able to keep up with the rent. Another tenant that I talked with, he was having issues with his health. He was having 2 random seizures that were occurring, so he was also dealing with that and other costs. So it's just a lot of things that are normal everyday issues that are just piling up, and people are just not able to keep up with the increase in rent and things of that nature.
That's right. How about you, Donovan?
Yeah, I like to piggyback on that with I've seen and I've noticed a lot of just lack of knowledge of real estate and financial, how to pretty much own your own property when it's left to you after untimely deaths and things of that nature. People just aren't in the position to take over when they're left with lump sums of money, or having to make life-changing choices. I've noticed that as well, with people that are losing a lot of their property, who have actually own homes in Washington and Southeast area. And when we're talking as far as apartments and people renting, pretty much what Salim and what Jewel was saying, people are just falling behind due to, untimely, we just went through a pandemic. It's hard for people to get back into work and then to be motivated to go out and to just get back into the flow of things. I'm not sure. Some people are further behind than that. I've heard tons of stories, even when we're actually, with our job, we're trying to empower people, right? So we're going to doors, we're knocking, we're trying to bring these resources to people to let them know that hey, you have a choice. You're not just out here on your own. There's somebody that can help you. Some people aren't trustworthy, and we have to talk through them through the doors, because sometimes they're not even trustworthy to open the door, because they may believe that you're a sheriff or someone that's trying to give them a court order. So we have to go through that barrier and just talking through the door to even actually allowing them to open the door and say, okay, you're a good guy. All right, let me open the door and see what you about. Let me open this envelope. What do you got for me? All right, actually, this is a number that can help you. So we've seen a lot of the spectrums of both ends, and it's a mouthful to talk about, but I don't want to take all the time.
No, thank you. I think that's important to underscore. And that was going to be actually my next question is, in this work, people are faced with a lot of trauma, right? So we are not the first people who talk to them about these eviction situations, right? Some of these people have already received, most of them should have already received, a summons to appear in court. If they have already gone through the court process, they will most likely be getting a notice that, an eviction is scheduled. So it has been tough. We've had people, because aside from the team knocking on doors and trying to contact people, if we're not able to contact somebody, we leave flyers. We leave flyers that have some general information on how they can connect to the legal resources, which is LT Land, the Landlord Tenant Legal Assistance Network. I think that's what it stands for. I always forget. And we'll share that information before we wrap up. we've had people call and say, why are you leaving this? This is, creating a whole lot of trauma, or reliving a lot of this trauma for me, because folks are just overwhelmed, as I think all three mentioned. First of all, it's just so expensive, and so many people are so far back on their rent that even another reminder of help, people may not be trusting because they've been through so much already. So I think we always, it's hard for us to balance us thinking we're doing something good, and we know we're doing something good, but being mindful that people may not be ready to accept that help. So I wonder, Salim, if you could talk to us a little bit about this experience of people not necessarily not trusting us, but being very wary about opening the doors to somebody talking about eviction prevention.
Yes. So I think something that is important for us as the folks doing the outreach to keep in mind is that we're working with people who are at crisis. They're in the middle of a crisis, and trying to find a place to live is definitely a crisis. Knowing that at any moment you can be evicted creates a lot of anxiety for people. And so it's a very sensitive topic, and we have to travel very delicately along this journey to help people. They don't know that we're coming. So if we're knocking on the door, banging on the door, which we have to in some of these buildings because the doors are these big metal doors, they may not even want to answer. They may think you the police and they don't want to talk to them, or they may think you're trying to come and evict them. But at the same time, we got to figure out, how do we navigate that space? So I think that's one of the things that we have to do. The other part is people aren't expecting the help, and that the help is free also. And so you got to tell folks like, hey, I'm only here to help you get assistance to pay your rent. I don't want any money from you. I don't need anything else. And, in the world that we live in, that's just hard to believe sometimes. But there are people, who do want to help you, and, who do care. And yeah, we may receive a stipend or a salary for it. But if you're doing this work in a nonprofit space, it's definitely because you care. And it's definitely not, for the funds. So it's a very delicate and sensitive space. And also, people aren't expecting you to come, so they may not be dressed. The homes may not be where they want them to be. So it's just trying to navigate all of these different spaces, to help people. But I think that it's really critical to realize that people are, in crisis. I remember one home we went to, and one of the residents there said that, they had to smoke a joint before they can process any of this stuff, that we were doing. The person had to self-medicate. And once I got home and I thought about it, and I was like, man, we're really going through, a lot of stuff. And some people have never had to go through the court system before. And then you see some of these big Latin words, you really don't know what they mean. And we already have a history of having a contentious relationship with the court system already, probably for some other things. So it's really trying. I think it takes a certain level of patience to help people with this stuff. Some folks aren't used to having to call in and use some of the automated services that are there. So sometimes we got to help people, call in and navigate that space as well. And to be honest, it's a qualifying system. Some folks may be right above the threshold for qualifying for the assistance, so then they have to go another route. And you just don't get the resources that you need the same day. And sometimes we expect stuff to happen as soon as we make a phone call. So it's also just trying to manage people's expectations, and keep in mind, when a person is in crisis and you're trying to manage expectations, it doesn't always go well. And plenty of time, we know that people have come in and tried to help some folks with the lackluster effort. And so then the next person that comes in to try to help has to also overcome previous experiences people have had with folks saying that they were going to help them and didn't do anything or didn't follow through. So, it's definitely a challenge on that end.
That's right. Jewel or Donovan, anything to add?
I think when I come to the doors, and yeah, you have to, I think the biggest thing when we're going to the doors is just making sure there's a lot of empathy in these situations. And just like Salim said, you just have to be patient with people because they're scrambling around trying to get things sorted of this nature, the nature of the crisis that they're in. So when either if it's a court date or an eviction, it's a little bit tougher with those that are getting evicted. But those that are with court dates, they're usually very more adamant about calling. Just as long as you explain everything to them and make sure you emphasize that we're here to help. This is a free program. So just go ahead and get the call. So usually they get that help. But yes, it does take a while for the lawyers to call back and get that sorted out. But they're just, after you explain everything, they're very thankful.
That's right. And I think what I've heard from all of you is that, yeah, there is a big difference between the folks who are slated, who have a court date, which is the beginning of the process, right? They've received the notice, and that's a good thing here in the district. People have to go through the court process in order to be evicted. You have your day in court. You can, avail yourself of a lawyer. You can make a defense as to why you haven't paid your rent. You could potentially win that. Now, for those folks who are faced with an eviction, the story is a little different. The judge has made a ruling on you, and a lot of folks feel just defeated after that. So, engaging with that population of folks can oftentimes be more difficult because, yeah, once again, they feel defeated. They feel like they have lost, and what other protection may be out there now that a judge has said, yeah, you are going to get evicted, but there are rights even within that. And we're having a presentation in just a little bit. Lori Leibowitz from Neighborhood Legal Services Project will be talking to us about tenant rights in just a minute, but we wanted to keep on talking about some of these experiences we're having, because once again, I think what we feel is that the problem is growing, and these efforts, while they're working, we get calls every day, once again, from the flyers we leave, people calling and saying, hey, I need support. So they are good in that sense, but they continue to increase. So we need to be mindful that the problem, unfortunately, is getting worse, and there is, a lot of help, other help, that we can find out there that we'll need. A lot of that may have to be volunteer help. So we want to make sure that we're letting folks know, giving an idea to folks, how the process works, what it's really like interacting with people in these type of situations, and the best ways that we can provide them the help that they need. So let me ask a couple more questions here. I think you all had brought this up a little earlier, but we had a discussion recently with a management company who shared with us that there are people who are, several thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars behind in their rent. So even catching up is not necessarily a reality. And then that's in a city where the rents are just way too high. Talk to us a little bit about what you've heard about rent prices, about, the inability to literally just keep up with, the price of living in the city.
Well, I could jump in there. The concept of affordable housing is a unique thing to understand, because the term affordable is based upon the AMI now, which is the area median income, and it's influenced by Loudoun County, Montgomery County, Alexandria, Fairfax County, and PG County. So those are some of the wealthiest counties in this country. And when we look at what's affordable, it's saying for a family of four, approximately $126,000 a year. And that is two adults making each, $63,000. but every household, in Ward 8 and 7 isn't a two parent or two adult income household bringing those funds in. And so that's what affordable looks like based upon the national capital region set by HUD. Now, what people can actually afford to pay that live in the community is substantially lower. And so it's really difficult. And with a situation like, let's take Barry Farms, for example, there are a lot of places that are being redeveloped and they're being identified as mixed income places. And so they'll set aside, say out of 100 units, they may set aside 10 that are for people who are at or below the area median income level. And that's just not enough to really have the housing stock in that community wouldn't be enough to meet the income, the current income of people in those communities. And so now it's trying to navigate what does that look like, for people. And then it's also, do we want to stay in a substandard space that's too small for the size of our family, that may not have a washer and dryer, that may not have parking, that have property management teams that don't respond to requests to make repairs? So you can probably find a place like that that you can possibly afford to pay, but the quality of life isn't there. So it's it's a conundrum. It's a very difficult space to try to navigate, to figure out how do we get a place that I actually want to live in that I can pay for versus living in a shack, like we're in a shanty town. But even those spaces are often hard to come by now because they're being torn down or they're purposely being neglected to make people want to leave. And this is kind of, where we're at right now with housing all throughout America, to be honest, but in particularly in urban centers where there's a large population of Latin and Black people. You're muted, Daniel.
Yeah, Don or Jewel, any thoughts, or what have you been hearing anything from folks when you engage with them about just the rent being too high to even stay in the city?
Yeah, pretty much just to piggyback off Salim, what we're seeing is just the rapid and fluctuation of gentrification. Rent is increasing at 2 times the rate that it was increasing probably 5 years ago, with so much going on, with so much development in Ward 8 alone. We've seen the destruction of St. Elizabeth Hospital. I guess it was a hospital, somewhat of a crazy home, but now we've seen the development of it to becoming, condos and things of that nature, which is raising the rent. That people who have actually owned homes there for probably 30 years, and they're being faced to the position of being pushed out by developers who are offering their grandkids probably $100,000 or to $200,000 to, hey, move now, and they're just going to redevelop their home and sell it for millions, and they just don't know that because of the lack of knowledge. We've also just seen just slum landlords who are just refuse to fix things because they know that eventually people with common sense or people who just don't want to no longer live in filth will want to move. So, and that just, promotes them selling to other developers. And then, like we see in Berry Farms, older historic developments being torn down and no one's being developed and history being lost.
That's right. Thank you for making that. Yeah, thank you for making that point, because I think we need to look at eviction in many ways. It's not just falling behind on your rent. There's so many other levers, the development, the overdevelopment that we're seeing, specifically in Ward 8, but also the conditions, right? The human created conditions that these landlords allow properties to run down that are causing people to say, well, that's a big cause why people don't pay their rents, is because they're living in such horrible conditions. But unfortunately, if they don't have everything in place to protect themselves legally, they can fall into this eviction trap. So thanks for lifting that up, Donovan. We want to transition soon into some conversation around, our rights, what rights people have. But I wanted to ask the team just to talk a little bit about, like, literally, like, what is it that you need to do effective outreach? I know, we get court dates, a list with names and addresses that we have to go out and try to connect with folks, trying to get more contact information. But really, what are some of the best practices for being out there and engaging with people that are on these lists?
I think some of the best practices is to be flexible, right? And be patient at the same time. Because like we said earlier, people are at crisis. They don't know that you're coming. And so you got to be willing to be flexible. You got to be willing to walk up some steps often, walk up some hills. And it's important that, we learn as much as we can just about city services in general. So learning about, ERAP, showing folks how to use that, even if it may be people that aren't on our list that we run into, and we can give them some of that information that we have, because we can also just generally canvass the area. But it's important that we know the specifics of some of these things and acquire as much knowledge as we can. So I would say that's the best practice, because people being at a crisis, they're hanging on every word that you're saying. If we give them misinformation, then it misrepresents the entire, organization, but it can also just destroy our credibility. And it helps that as we continue to do it, we built up a certain level of awareness of the neighborhoods that we're going into, and knowing how to move, and knowing like the culture and the posture of different places. And so, there's a lot of little things that we didn't think about in the beginning that has helped us, to move through and canvas better. We would collect the data, then have to go back to a desktop and input it. Now we have mobile devices, so we can do that stuff, just instantly, and that cuts down on time and allows us to get to more people and help them out a little bit easier. But I think for me, the biggest thing, like I said, is the trainings that we're getting now. It's really helping me to understand more about this entire process. And when you know your rights, you have that knowledge as that foundation, then you're a whole lot more confident in your ability, to help folks and help them navigate the system. And I'm finding that oftentimes a lot of people's spirits are cracked. And if you can get them the information and the knowledge that they need, then they can feel more confident in their ability to win the cases that they may have, because they have something there. But when you don't know, you just feel a lot of anxiety and pressure.
That's right. And let's give a shout out to the folks who are working with us, Neighborhood Legal Services, Bread for the City, Legal Aid, Rock DC, LEDC, and Jobs with Justice. And I apologize if I'm missing any right off the top, but this has been, an experience in, making the road as we walk it. We've learned from being out there, and we're adjusting to what we need. Amanda dropped in the chat. She works with the hotline, and she's asking how we can increase, or what can we do to improve experiences. So we'll get to some questions in just a sec, but wanted to lift that up, that this has been quite the learning experience. We're hoping to just continue to improve, because as mentioned again, the need is increasing. So very important that we learn from either our mistakes or our experiences, and improve the services that are out there to provide to people faced with an eviction. Jewel and Donovan, any thoughts on, like, what are the best practices as we're out there, knocking on doors and talking to people? Just how can we be more effective in getting the word out around these supports that people have? You want to go ahead,
I
Jewel?
can, yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. So I think the best practices in being out there, just to always emphasize on being just patient and have the empathy in these situations. I think it's always good to be clear about because there's going to be different situations that you may come across. So it's just learning how to navigate those specific situations. So, because not everybody is going to need ERAD, they might already know that, but another tenant might need to know that information. For example, one tenant that I came across with, he didn't know anything about uh, like going to court, having an attorney, just having legal representation, anything of that nature. He needed his ID, things of that nature. So those are some of, and that was entirely brand new to me. So it was just, you gotta get the training and practices and really work with your team just to make sure everybody's informed so you can go out there and really be helpful and informative to the tenants that are in these situations.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, I think, once again, I think out of this work, we will have created, hopefully, a clearer roadmap of, as you mentioned, there are so many different situations, right? There's people who are like, I'm already, I already have a lawyer, I already applied to ERAP, I don't need your help. There's people who like don't know any of the process, right? We've encountered, especially some of our older residents, where they don't have access to the internet. A lot of the hearings that are happening now are all either online or over the phone. So, and in order for them to avail themselves of LT LAN, they have to call a certain number or do an online intake. So, I'm glad Salim mentioned that, we use tablets out there because that does make it a lot easier for us to be able to connect people to the services when they don't have those resources available to them. Salim, I don't know if you remember, one of the first times we went out, we encountered a senior citizen who depended on her sister who lived upstairs to communicate. So these are some of the very real issues that are out there that sometimes impede people from being able to get the services that they need. Donovan, anything to add? What are the best practices that you've learned so far that help in connecting people to the resources they may need?
Yeah, some of the best practices that I've used is actually just being sympathetic and connecting with the people you're speaking with at the door. You're not necessarily knowing what's going on behind the door. They could have just got the eviction letter. They could have just got the court date. You really just don't know. You just have to really be very, like I said, I've heard before, flexible to what is going on, to what you're hearing. So you're pretty much, because you're already coming to somebody with something very sensitive, I guess, some sensitive information. Because in the beginning, we started out just literally posting flyers on people's doors saying, hey, you got a court date. Hey, you got an eviction coming up. So we've kind of transitioned to putting that sensitive information into an envelope now. So through our, transition of working and seeing what works for us and what's not working for us, and the feedback that we are getting from the community is how I've been able to maneuver and actually having a sense of, all right, this is a door that I'm going to approach with saying, hey, you got a court date coming up, or a door that I'm going to say, hey, I've noticed that we've seen that you have an upcoming court date. Just being more sensitive with your language, and just always pretty much putting yourself as if you were the one being evicted, I should say, will always be a good sense of when you are engaging with someone. Just put yourself in their shoes before you engage. Just picture yourself if the roles were exchanged so that you could know how to engage with somebody.
That's right. That's really important because many times, you know, although it is sometimes often hard times, hard rather, engaging with somebody. Once you do, a lot of people will open up. They need somebody to listen to their story, to hear what they're going through. So I think that's really, really important as well. Well, I want to thank the three of you for the work that you are doing. It's really important. We have one more team member who unfortunately had an emergency right before the meeting and maybe joining us in a little bit. But, you know, we've got a team of 4 outreach members out there working Ward 7 and 8, ensuring that people know their rights. I think part of the benefit of all of this is that it is sensitizing the community more, since we are literally out there at the doors, knocking on doors. People see us, you know, we'll go out there. Selena and Jewel, if you want to show your EmpowerDC shirt, you know, we're out there and people see, you know, who are these guys? What are they out here doing? You know, it draws a little bit of attention. So people are becoming aware that yes, there are resources out there to help you. Celine mentioned sometimes it's difficult sometimes for folks to understand that, to accept that, wait a second, somebody out there really kind of cares for us, because we do live in a society that oftentimes does not care about these type of situations. So it's important work that we are doing, and we just hope to continue building on. I've put in the chat the number for the Landlord Tenant Legal Assistance Network, LT-LAN. It's 202-780-2575. They work from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. If folks are not able to connect right when they call, it's important to let folks know that they should leave a message. They should you know, and expect to get a call back. They will call back. Oftentimes, you know, the lines are very busy, especially like on Monday mornings. So it's important for folks to leave their contact information and to make sure that they're responding to calls. Oftentimes people may do, you know, screen calls and not recognize a number. But that's been really important, something that we've learned too. Amanda's giving us an update. 9 to 1 on Fridays, and they try to call back. Amanda and I really had just recently literally had the situation where I'm like, this person called and they said, you know, they haven't gotten a call back, and she was like, no, we called, they just didn't answer. So it's important to really, as we connect with people, to encourage them, right? If you made the call, you know, even though you may pick up and it's a telemarketer, the next call may be, you know, somebody trying to connect you with that. And thank you, Rebecca. There is an intake, online intake form as well, which we'll get and put in the chat in just a minute. But let me ask folks who may have a question either to drop it in the chat or just be ready to ask it in a sec. I do want to turn it over to, oh, thank you, Scott. Yes, that's it. I do want to turn it over to Lori Leibowitz, who is going to give us a presentation or talk to us about the rights that people have. I think it's important to always, we try to add that as part of these presentations, primarily because some of these rights have changed. You know, they've changed ever since we came out of the health emergency. Some of the emergency legislation that was enacted has timed out. So there are some changes, but in general, part of what we always love to tell folks, you know, is that they have rights and, you know, they need to use them, especially here in the district. There are some great tenant protection rights. So Lori, without any further ado, I'll turn it over to you rather. You're ready.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks to the whole team at EmpowerDC. You guys are doing amazing work, and it really is making a difference. Can I share my screen? I have a little PowerPoint. If not, I can do it without the PowerPoint.
Yes, let me make you a host. Okay, you should be able to share now.
Yeah. All right. So as Daniel said, we have a lot of rights in DC. Skip over the beginning part of this. So first of all, you do not need a written lease in DC to be a tenant. You have a conversation with someone and say, I'm going to rent this apartment from you. I'm going to rent your basement and I'm going to give you $800 a month. And they say, great, you can rent my basement for $800 a month. And then you give them $800 each month and they accept it. You are a tenant. The end. A lot of people think that they are not tenants because they don't have a written lease. After your lease expires, if I signed a lease to rent that basement apartment for $800 a month, and my lease ended on September 30th, I don't have to sign another lease. My lease automatically renews month to month, generally. You can sign another lease, but you don't have to. The landlord can only terminate the lease for a reason. They can't just say, your lease ended September 30th, bye-bye. During the lease period, the landlord cannot change the lease terms without the tenant's agreement. And then finally on leases, the landlord has to have a reason to kick you out. The tenant can leave at the end of the lease term. They just have to give the notice listed in the lease. So it is, if you have a lease, it is good to read it and know what it says. Evictions, what we're here talking about today. Landlords can only evict tenants with a court order. In almost all cases, including non-payment of rent cases, landlords have to give notice before they file a complaint in court. If you go to court, everything goes badly, you get a judgment against you, and you get evicted, your landlord has to give you at least 21 days notice of a date certain that the eviction will take place. And the eviction itself must be supervised by the US Marshals. And they will come and do a lock change. In the good news, gone are the days when they used to literally throw all your stuff on the street. They do a lock change and then you have about a week to be able to, under certain detailed circumstances that we won't talk about here, to come get your stuff. And if your case is a non-payment case, you have the right to redeem, you have the right to pay and stay. You pay 100% amount of the money that you owe, even up till the moment that the marshals are standing at the door with the locksmith, then you can stay. There are only a few reasons that landlords can evict tenants in DC. Non-payment of rent is the most common one, about 90% of cases. But a new-ish law is that they can only file a non-payment case against you if you owe more than $600. Violating your lease, illegal acts, the landlord wants to use it themselves, or they're selling it and the buyer wants to use it themselves. Substantial renovation, they're knocking it down, it's not going to be housing anymore, condo conversion. Notices, there's a lot of notice that's required. So like I said, tenants should get a 30-day notice. It cannot be waived in the lease. It used to be that your lease could say that you're waived the right to a notice in a non-payment case. That's not true anymore. You must get a notice for a non-payment case. And most, I said 30-day notice required for all eviction cases. For different kinds of eviction cases, there are different amounts of days. But you'll get at least, they get at least 30 days notice. Notices for non-payment have to include the total amount owed, a ledger, and some other information. Payment plans. I'm looking at this now, and I think the rule about the tenant's primary language actually expired on October 7th. So I'm going to have to revise my PowerPoint, but it should be in English and Spanish. It must be in English and Spanish. So you get the notice, then the landlord files in court if you don't fix, right? The notice says you have to fix these things, you have to pay back what you owe, you have to stop, you're not allowed to have dogs on your lease, you have a dog, you have to get that dog out of the apartment. You have 30 days to fix that. If you don't fix it, they can file in court. the court papers then must be served to you 30 days before your court hearing. There has been some great reporting on some bad service. So now the rule is if the landlord posts that on your door, they have to take a picture of it with a timestamp. And landlords have to show that they've done their paperwork properly before they can file in court. So they have to have a business license and register under the rent control rules before they file. So if they file and then they do that after, no dice. Also in exciting news, if you have an eviction case filed against you, you can get it sealed. If you win your case, then the case will be automatically sealed, and the court has been doing a really good job making that happen. Even if you lost your case, it will get automatically sealed after 3 years. And then there are a number of reasons, I'm not going to read them out loud to you tonight, that you can get your case sealed even if you didn't win. So late fees cannot be more than 5% of your rent, and you cannot be evicted for late fees. They're not part of that redemption amount, that amount you need to pay and stay. And ERAP sometimes covers late fees, depending on the situation. Landlords have to keep, and I'm thinking back to our earlier conversation, landlords have to keep units and common areas in good repair. And they also have to give you notice before they come and repair things, unless it's emergency. You know, if a pipe is leaking or something like that, they can come in without notice. And a lot of tenants end up in sort of a catch-22, that if your apartment is in bad shape, then if you have an eviction case, we can get the amount owed reduced. But it's also terrible to live in an apartment in bad shape. And so it is a tricky situation for folks. But you absolutely have the right to live in a habitable apartment. And DC has a lot of rules about what that means. My general advice to all people in landlord and tenant situations: get it in writing, put it in writing. So keep records of your rent payments, receipts, copies of money orders, canceled checks. This just came up this week that I was going through someone's stack of money order receipts and found that they had paid a lot more money than was in the landlord's ledger. And we were able to convince the landlord of that because we had those receipts. If you're, for whatever reason, paying in cash, literally lay out the cash on the floor and take a picture of it with your phone. Take pictures of money order receipts with your phone, take pictures of everything. Same thing with requests for repairs, do it over email or text if you can, take pictures of things. If you make a phone call, write down somewhere on October 19th at 4:35 p.m. I talked to Lori Leibowitz and told her that my oven is broken, and she said that someone would be sent out. I just keep records of everything all the time. It makes everything easier. And then we already have the
Thank you so much, Lori.
You're welcome. And I know I sped through that, so if anybody has any questions or I said anything too fast, just let me know.
No, I wanted to open it up for questions to see if anybody just has any general questions on what the team had presented, but also around the rights and the process around eviction. If you have any burning questions that we can either answer now, or we could potentially even follow up with you to get you some of those answers. So please feel free to come off mute if you have any questions and or drop something in the chat.
Hi, I have a question about when you said that the landlord has to give the 30-day notice to, I'll say animals, because that's what I work with, the people who surrender their animals or get rid of their pets because the landlord and things like that. But what happens is they get threatened that they're going to come back on Monday and this is a Friday and the pet has to be gone. And most clients are fearful of retaliation, so they won't take it any further than just calling the Humane Rescue Alliance saying, this is what the landlord is saying. I need to get rid of my pet and I need to, now get rid of my pet now. So how do we as Humane Rescue Alliance deal with when the landlords or when the property, because I think it's the property manager at the apartment complex, they say, oh, this needs to be gone by Monday, even though this is Friday, but you're saying that they have 30 days to deal with that. That's one question. And another quick question is, this is for all DC properties or DC housing, or this is through DC government properties or even private houses and apartments that are rented out for DC residents?
So all of these rights are for all tenants in DC. Answer that one first. And just on the pet specifically, like unless your lease says you're not allowed to have pets, you are allowed to have pets. But you have the, if you're breaking your lease, and I do give the pet example because it's in some ways the cleanest, right? Like you're not allowed to have a dog, you have a dog. Whereas like you're making too much noise, like what does that mean? No one knows. So yes, you have 30 days to cure. So, you may want to ask them to like look at their notice to quit or encourage them to call LT Land. Did that answer your question? You asked a second question, then I kind of lost your first one.
Oh, well, that was it. Because again, like most people won't take it past us because they fear of retaliation of being put out. So they would try to get rid of the pet that day compared to them having 30 days to find different things to do. But that's usually, like I said, the property manager, not necessarily, I guess, the owner, because we don't never necessarily know who owns the property. That's a lot of more research to find out who really owns the property. So it's the property manager who's there, who's saying, oh, if they have a cat. And then they also try to say that there are no exceptions, which people can have emotional support animals, which is when we then step in for that too, because we know people can have those emotional support animals. But then I went to senior buildings and they can't have them in senior buildings. So I'm just trying to, get some clarity on that part, because I do the outreach and I do walk around Southeast mostly. That's the targeted area. And again, people won't speak up because of fear of retaliation, of being put out and not having any place to live. So they usually get rid of their pet.
To Jean's question in the chat, if a new landlord takes over the apartment, you can ask to sign a new lease. The new landlord, I don't think I'm looking at Rebecca at your box here. Make sure.
Yeah, I was going to close the loop on the pet thing. So the landlord absolutely has to give you a 30-day notice to cure, and you have 30 days to cure that violation. If the pet is an emotional support animal, then the landlord, you can tell the landlord that, and they are required to, under most circumstances, I would say 90% of the time, allow you to keep that pet as emotional support animal. So if you get someone who has been told by their manager they have to get rid of the pet, I understand that the fear of retaliation is real for lots of people. And there are some really nasty managers out there, but they can't throw your stuff out. They can't get rid of you. Again, if you have an emotional support animal, there are ways to document that and to be allowed to keep that animal. I'm sorry, I didn't look at the chat. So yeah.
There's
Agreed,
a couple of
David.
questions. There's one that Lori had seen. If a new landlord rather, takes over an apartment, can they ask to sign a new lease? And there's also one asking to confirm landlord no longer has to provide notice in the tenant's primary language.
Yeah, so I just double checked while Rebecca was talking on that one. They have to provide it in English and Spanish, but they know the law saying that they have to provide it in other languages if the landlord knows it did unfortunately expire, or it may I think that one Yeah, that one expired. So,
Do you want me to take the lease question?
yes, please.
Okay. So if you get a new landlord, there may be lots of reasons to not get a new lease. So some older leases might have protections in them that the new lease might not have. I mean, it's not as common now that everybody's entitled to a 30-day notice in non-payment of rent and lease violation cases. It used to be only in lease violation cases were you entitled to a 30-day notice. But there may be other things that, other provisions that you had under your old lease that you don't want to get rid of. And so there's no requirement to sign a new lease. And there may be a reason to sign a new lease, depending on the terms of the lease or amenities or other things. But if you want that lease renewed before you sign, or if you want it reviewed before you sign it, you can call LT Land and an attorney can look it over for you. But I often tell people don't sign a new lease because your old lease is good until the day you move out of the apartment.
Thank you, Rebecca. There is one question in the chat also. What is the process of getting a formally recognized emotionally support animal?
Assuming that you mean the landlord, like being allowed to have it in the, so generally you need to make a request in writing to the landlord, and you don't have to, but most landlords are going to require you to, and I would just recommend doing it at the beginning, is to get a letter from a medical professional saying that you need an emotional support animal as, because of a certain health situation or disability, and to be as specific as possible about what it is that you need. And they don't have to be specific about your health situation, right? Like, it's not your landlord's business what your health is, but just, Lori Leibowitz has a health condition that requires her to have a large dog that, that's at least knee high. Whatever it is that.
Well, thank you so much for that. Well, folks, it is about 7:40 p.m. Unless there are any other questions, I did want to share my contact information for EmpowerDC. That is my cell phone number and my email. As I mentioned, although right now we do not have any sort of formal volunteer opportunities, part of why we're doing this is to, sensitize people to that, you can help, like, especially organizations as Shakila, who works with tenants, people who just work with people in general. It's important to know some of these facts, some of the, the protections that people have. Of course, the LTLAN phone number is really important to be able to share with any of your neighbors, friends, clients you may have that may find themselves in this situation. So we hope that this was helpful for many of you. It's a series that we want to continue to have. And yes, please discourage people from self-evicting. That's right, exactly, Lori. People need to know that they have rights, and it's been surprising, to be honest, how many people just feel that despair, that nobody's going to help me. This is it. I gotta leave, and they leave even before availing themselves of any of the rights that they have. So for us, it's important to keep talking about this, bringing folks together, and I know David had mentioned this a little earlier around the people who feel some sort of fear, retribution, some sort of if I say something may happen. We need to start bringing people together, letting know they have rights, and taking action around that. So hopefully as I mentioned, these efforts that are taking place now, with several we're one of the, many organizations that are doing this work right now to connect with people around the city. We just hope to grow and get better at it and help as many people as we can. So I want to thank everyone for attending. If you need to reach out for anything, feel free to give us a call or an email. Unless there are any other questions, I think we can close out for the evening. All right, let me thank Jewel and Donovan for your work. Salim had to, he's in school, so he had to jump back in class. So we appreciate him making the time for being here. And thank you all. Thank you all for being here this evening. And let's continue to be in contact. And we will talk with you all soon. Thank you so much, Lori, for your presentation. Always super helpful. And yeah, let's continue the fight. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great good night.
Thanks, everyone.